Have you heard of a Celtic God of Halloween and thought, ooh, this is very interesting, I haven't heard this before? You're not alone. I was there a few years ago, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about that and also about Samhain in Ireland and the traditions that surround it. Díomh Gwine Ushla, agus Fáilte, hello and welcome. It's Misha Amy. I'm Amy, the Crafty Gaelic, and this is my YouTube channel where I talk about Irish history, folklore, magic, and food. So a few years back, I was watching a TV show that I really liked, and it was in my early witchy days where I started getting into the occult and started reading things. And I was just sitting down watching these two brothers monster hunt and look at different aspects of different belief systems and different monsters and lore. All very interesting. And then one episode, they started talking about this Celtic god of Halloween. I'm sitting there going, I've never heard this before. And I've had a very keen interest in Irish stories for a very long time. So it kind of surprised me that I hadn't heard of a Celtic god of Halloween. And then
maybe this witch isn't working a grudge. Maybe they're working a spell. Check this out. 3 blood sacrifices over 3 days. The last before midnight on the final day of the final harvest. Celtic calendar, the final day of the final harvest is October 31st. Halloween. Exactly.
What exactly are the blood sacrifices for?
If I'm right, this witch is summoning a demon. And not just any demon. Samhain.
Am I supposed to be impressed?
Dean, Samhain is the damn origin of Halloween. The Celts believed that October 31st was the one night of the year when the veil was thinnest between the living and the dead. And it was Samhain's night. I mean, masks were put on to hide from him, sweets left on doorsteps to appease him, faces carved into pumpkins to worship him. He was exorcised centuries ago.
So
Samhain. Really. I sat there and literally face palmed. Why? Just why? And to Sam and Dean Winchester's credit, they're not the first people to come out with this, clearly. Whoever was writing that episode, whoever was researching it, hadn't done their research. There is a very common, very incorrect misconception that Samhain is a specific person who is the god of Halloween. That's just completely not true. And I hate to break it to you, if you have been going around thinking that this is true, you're also incorrect. Actually, I don't hate breaking it to you. I like correcting incorrections, particularly about my own cultural heritage. It's kind of what I like doing. And I do like also educating on the correct information on Irish culture and heritage and history. So what is Samhain? So first, I'm going to look at the name of the festival itself. So Samhain is one of our cross-quarter days, fire festivals, as they're kind of called. Samhain is also, like Bealtaine and like Lunasa, the Irish language word or name for the month in which it happens around. So Samhain is actually November in the Irish language, and Iha Hauna is Samhain Eve, or the night before Samhain, which is the 31st of October, which is Halloween. In the Irish language as well, October is Derafor, and Derafor is the end of harvest. So when the Winchesters in that clip are talking about the last day of the last harvest, the last day of the last harvest, or Derafor, so the last day of October, is Halloween, is the 31st of October. And like with other Irish festivals, as I've just mentioned, of Lunasa being August and Bealtaine being May, this is very common that this is done around the Irish festivals. And we've kept these names in the Irish language for the months of the year as well, because they are at those festivals at those certain times of year, so they punctuate the year, as months tend to do. and seasons. Samhain in particular and Bealtaine are two very important times of year, and they are at opposite ends of the year. Bealtaine being the festival that welcomes in summer, and Samhain being the end of summer. One account on our national folklore collection on ducas.ie. I will put the source link down in the description below, but the source does talk about May Day being the 1st of May and Samhain being the end of the year, essentially. It describes this as the old Gaelic division of the year from Samhain to Bealtaine. From Samhain to Bealtaine is essentially you have the winter months and then the spring, but in Ireland we don't exactly get 4 distinct seasons in the year. So Samhain to Bealtaine would have been a time where things were resting, and then when you come into Imbolc in the spring, yes, there are some spring growth and some spring births of lambs and different baby animals that I can't remember the names of now. Like with a lot of our other festivals throughout the year, Samhain has specific customs surrounding pishogues, magic, divination, honouring our ancestors, feasting, and a whole lot of other different things. So now I'm going to go through 7 Samhain traditions, most of which are still practiced today. So the first one is costumes and dressing up. And this is something that's very, very common and very commercialised now for Halloween, where you can go to practically any shop online. There are even Halloween pop-up shops that have Halloween costumes. But this custom would have been practiced to essentially help guys or hide, particularly kids, from otherworld beings on Ihahauna or on Halloween night. Because at this time of year, the veil between our world and the other world is thinning on Halloween night, 31st of October, it is at its thinnest. So when the veil is this thin, beings from the other world come into our world and walk among the living. In order to not be brought back into the other world when the night ended, many people would dress up their kids as weird looking monsters, and how they depicted or how they thought that otherworld beings looked, so that they could pass without detection while these beings were walking among us. The costumes that they would have worn would have been nothing like we're used to today, with the very commercialized costumes, and would have been made out of maybe potato sacks, would have been very, very homemade out of rags and things like that. Even when I was very small and growing up, it was very common to just put on a black bin bag or a trash bag and just put on a witch's hat or a very cheap plastic mask or something like that. The thoughts of going to a shop where you had an array of different costumes and you could be literally anything was very, very far removed from 1990s Ireland. Trick-or-treating then, following on from costumes, we're very used to nowadays people going trick-or-treating and little kids dressed up getting sweets and getting treats. And the term trick-or-treating was actually coined in North America in the 1950s. However, its roots, and we can't say for certain that this is definitely where it came from, but there are roots in going from house to house on Samhain in Ireland. First of all, the tricks themselves were very, very common. And this might have been inspired by some of the tricks that the otherworld beings in Irish stories are known to play on the living. So one account on our National Folklore collection does talk about cabbage stumps specifically being gathered weeks before Halloween. Essentially, they would be thrown at the doors of maybe a neighbour that was particularly crabby or that nobody liked. And this was one of the very, very common tricks that would have been played on people. There was also other tricks, like people's doors might have been stolen. I found reference to this happening but couldn't actually find why it would have been done. I did also find another account on Dúchas talking about Alms Night or Almish Night. So essentially people would dress up, usually younger people, and they would dress in masks and bags and go from house to house asking for alms. And generally someone from the house would come out and give them money, and maybe they'd do a song or a dance. As they came near the house as well, they would blow into a bottle, making a really kind of loud sound so that people knew they were outside. Another tradition I would have grown up with in the going from door to door would have been the penny for the pooka or penny for the pookie or penny for the boogie. So instead of saying trick or treat, which as I've mentioned already is a North American thing, it would have been penny for the pooka. So going from house to house asking for penny for the pooka. And the pooka is one of the other world beings that I've spoken about already in one of my other videos. There's an article from an Irish radio website, Today FM, which talks about different versions of penny for the pooka or penny for the bookie around the country. And this is again very common with our folklore. There will be a tradition in one county or even one town, and in the next town or county over, it's slightly varied. And that brings me on to number 3 for the Samhain 7, which, in speaking about the pooka, ar ihe hauna cochan an pooka ar na smera. And again, there's a couple of different versions of this one, but this particular one taken from dukas.ie means that on Samhain Eve or Halloween, the pooka shits on the blackberries. There's a lot of different versions of this. Another very common one is that he spits on the blackberries. And along a lot of hedgerows in Ireland, you will still see blackberries growing quite abundantly at this time of year. And it's very bad or bad luck. And you're very much warned against picking blackberries after Halloween, because the pooka is probably went at them. So if you're planning on making blackberry jam, get in there before Halloween. Number 4 is ancestor acknowledgement. So given that spirits from the other world visit at this time of year, it is prime time for honouring the dead and welcoming them back among us. There's many different references on our National Folklore collection talking about honouring the dead, leaving the doors open, both the front and back door if you can, to welcome the dead in and so that they have a safe passage through the house. There's also a lot of references to leaving something out for them to eat by the hearth or on the kitchen table, and also that food that is left out for the good folk or for the ancestors should not be touched and should be thrown out the next morning. It's also believed that on All Souls Night, which is the night before All Souls Day in the Christian tradition, being again Halloween night, it's believed that the souls of not only your own ancestors, but those who have lived in the house before you will come back to visit. Other customs would be to leave clean water in the kettle and to not rake your fire and to leave the fire smouldering. It's commonly believed in Ireland that a silent supper or dumb supper, as it's called, is an Irish tradition. One of my favourite YouTubers, Tara Tyne, over on Diary of a Ditch Witch, has done a specific video looking at the origins of the dumb supper or the silent supper and whether or not it's an Irish tradition. And I would highly recommend you go check that out. I'm not going to go through it here because she's done it very brilliantly over there. So I will leave that link in the description as well. But leaving out food for the ancestors brings me on to the next point, point 5, which is food. Now, if you've followed my channel for any length of time, you know I really like food, and there are specific dishes that would have been associated with Samhain and are still associated very much with Samhain. So typical Samhain dishes would have included colcannon, and there are some reports on Dúchas that it was so common that colcannon was eaten that it was actually in some districts called colcannon night. And colcannon is a mixture of mashed potato, cabbage, bacon, and cream and butter. And it's this creamy kind of mixed dish that I used to really hate when I was younger, but it's actually really tasty. So if you'd like to see some colcannon made and how it's made and what's involved in it, let me know down below in the comments and I'll add it to my list for Crafty Kitchen. Another really popular dish for Samhain is boring brack, which is barn brack. I already did a video on how to make boring brack and I will include this up here in the cards so you can check that out if you haven't seen it already. In that video as well, I do make a little bit of a mistake where I say that boring means speckled when actually it's brack that means speckled. So just to correct myself on that because I was incorrect. So boring brack or barn brack is a very tasty fruit loaf that has lots of nice spices in it, and it is also used for divination. Which brings me on to point number 6, which is divination and Samhain. So divination at Samhain is done in many different ways. I won't go into them all here, but just to mention a few. So as I mentioned in the barn brack video, there's many different things that can be included or added to the barn brack to essentially give someone a fortune for the upcoming year. It's very common to see a ring denoting that you would get married, or a pea that says you won't get married. Lots and lots of different things can be included. There's lots of accounts on Dúchas as well for what to include in the barn brack and what it means. Other forms of divination are maybe a little bit strange to think about now. I do have a little bit of a theory on divination as well. Now, this is not proven by any means, it's just a personal theory that I have. Given that a lot of these methods would have been used and would have been noted around the time and from a time when there was a lot of emigration happening from Ireland, and essentially having to choose which one of your children emigrated, which one got married, which one entered the priests or the nuns, it would have been very common. So I do have a theory that it's doubling as a divination and also a kind of pull straws method of, okay, who has to go across the sea, who is getting married to Jim down the road. Because people would have had dowries, and you would have had a dowry not only getting married, and the family would have had to provide one to make sure you married well, but also you would have needed a dowry to go into the church in a lot of cases. So yeah, nevertheless, it was used as divination, and there's a lot of divination and fortune telling practices that are noted for Samhain, such as if a girl ate salty herrings on Halloween night, and if she dreamt that a certain boy gave her a drink, she would marry that boy. I mean, whatever works. Sometimes a boy and a girl go out in a field where there's a cabbage on Halloween night. They each pull up a head of cabbage, and if there's clay on the roots, they will be married soon, and if there's no clay on the roots, they won't be married. Another very common one that I talk about in my hearth magic class is that there was placement of either 2 nuts or 2 beans into the hearth or into the fire, and some of them differ again from region to region, but a general consensus is that if the beans fly off in the same direction, that they will get married. If they fly off in separate directions, they won't get married. If they stay together in the fire, they will get married. If one of them explodes, they won't get married. Another one regarding hearth magic or hearth divination at Samhain was that it was very customary for, if there was a house full of daughters, for their petticoats to be hung in front of the fire, and a man would come in and select a petticoat, and that was the daughter that he would marry. Another common one was that at night time the girls would rake the hearth and let it smolder and put a bowl of water in front of the hearth, and the first man that moved it would be the one that they married. I don't know how effective these were, and I would like to know how happy these marriages were after all of this. But yeah, personally, I'm very happy to be able to get to know and choose a partner before marrying them. And all of that fire talk brings me on to the last point number 7, which is the bonfire. So bonfire, which has an etymological root to bonefire, is Tinacnov in Irish. And a very common practice on Halloween night was to light a bonfire. And it's very common in Lunasa and also for Bealtaine to also light bonfires. Practice that I thought was really interesting that I found on the National Folklore Collection was that after lighting a big bonfire, the ashes were collected and placed in a circle, and a stone representing each member of the family, a stone each, would be put inside the circle of ashes, and if any stone was moved before dawn, it would mean that there would be harm done to that person. So that's quite interesting. There was no further explanation on whether that meant that the person that moved the stone was specifically doing harm and doing a curse or a hex on them, or whether it was more of a divination tool. That's not really clear. But there are lots of other references to stones being moved and stones being an indication of whether you have permission to build a house or things like that as well in our folklore. So it could mean either. Those are my 7 points on Samhain. I hope if you didn't know some of them already that you found it interesting, and if you did know them or you know any more that I maybe forgot or that you find interesting, do put them in the comments below. I always love to learn more. What are you doing this spooky Samhain season? Are you going to be dressing up? Will you be decorating your house? Are you carving a pumpkin or a turnip? Do let me know down in the comments below. It helps boost the video, but it also helps me engage with you all. Also, if you did like the video, do think about giving a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, do hit the subscribe button. I will be making more regular content over the next few weeks, and I have some very interesting videos coming up. Also, if you fancy supporting the channel and supporting me in helping to get better equipment for recording and making better videos, then you can buy me a coffee or a cup of tea on Ko-fi, and I will put that link in the description below too. If you can't do that, that is absolutely no problem. Maybe share this video with someone you think might be interested, or maybe there's someone in your life that you know to think that Samhain is a Celtic Irish god. I mean, look, we've all been there, so yeah. As always, resource links and more information are available down in the description below. Gurb míle mac with us chat. Thank you very much for coming. Agus slán full. I will see you in the next video. I wonder what this is about. I wonder what this. The boring back. Blech.